Picture a caveman, or a woman. Let's give credit where it's due. It was probably a woman. Imagine that she's faced with two options, a square wheel and a round wheel. I wonder if she would brainstorm what she could do with a square wheel and then what she could do with a round wheel. Well, since we don't really know how cave people thought, I like to think that she didn't brainstorm. She just said, the problem is I need to move things more easily. When it comes to creative problem solving, we've been cultured to leap into action. We measure the creativity by the number of ideas that come from brainstorming. While brainstorming has been and always will be an important part of the creative problem-solving process, the problem is it overshadows a critical stage, that of identifying the problem itself. Albert Einstein is credited with saying, the formulation of the problem is often far more essential than the solution. Another way of putting this is that the problem may not be the problem. Effective creative problem solving is about first identifying the problem that those ideas are meant to solve in order to get the best possible solution. At one time in my life, I was a professional organizer, a Marie Kondo clone. People often said to me, Ellia, my problem is I can't organize my papers, or I can't keep my home tidy. As we worked, they came to realize that the problem wasn't that they couldn't organize their papers. It was that they couldn't identify their priority life or business goals. How on earth could they organize their papers and purge what they don't need if they didn't know what was important to keep? My trajectory from different leadership roles was what got me into creative problem solving as an organizational trainer and leadership coach. I was a senior manager in the nonprofit sector, and there was a common element there, that they were embracing what they believed was creative problem solving, but there was a consistent pattern. We were good at churning out solutions, but often they were the same solutions as before, or they just didn't hit the mark. And I just realized I forgot to show you this magnificent slide of what it's like to be an organizer, for those of you who don't know. Now, I've discovered that during that process, when I was working in nonprofits, that everybody was missing a fundamental step. We were plunging headlong into ideating without taking the time to truly understand the problem. This is when I realized that through neuroscience, I had discovered the missing link, that misidentifying problems has to do with the way our brains function. Let me explain. We've all been told that the brain was designed to keep us safe. Using the language of neuroscience, when we experience acute stress, anything that's threatening, even something that's just beyond what we normally experience, our brain takes over and it sends the chemicals that signal the fight or flight response. Applying this to problem solving makes it easier to appreciate that any deviation from what we're used to hearing, even something as small as a new idea, can trigger the same physiological response as being in physical danger. And those same chemicals produce that same fight or flight response. I've witnessed how people time and time again avoid this kind of stress by falling back on what they've always done. My opinion, though, is that the more we rely on addressing and seeing problems the same way, the more those decision-making pathways get made in the brain, which means that you're more likely to address problems the same way, and therefore you think you are addressing the same problem, but you're not. Wrong problem, wrong solution. I'm here today because I believe it's crucial to apply creative problem solving beyond the confines of business. We're living in an era that's riddled with more complex issues than ever before. Climate change, social injustice, global health crises. With such complex issues, I believe that we cannot bypass problem identification. It doesn't serve us well. What we need to do is to dig into the root cause creatively and thoughtfully. Our lives and our children's lives are at stake. But it's not just existential issues that we need to respond to. Problems are all around us. We face problems every day, right? So when an issue that urgently needs solving smacks us in the face, why shouldn't we jump in and try and find a solution? Why should we take a step back, take a breath, and begin with problem identification? Quite simply, if you don't, you may end up spending more time, money, and energy than you need to solving the wrong problem and coming up with ineffective solutions. I'd like to talk about two organizations where addressing the problem differently changed the outcome. Caroline Vanderlip was sick of seeing the garbage piling up on the streets of New York City on trash night, and she was determined that she was going to solve the problem of how to reduce garbage on a large scale. While she was working to come up with a solution, she'd learned that single-use food serving items, such as paper plates and cups, plastic knives and forks, these items alone were responsible for 9 million tons of waste in the US each year. Caroline realized that the problem wasn't too much garbage. It was that the amount of garbage couldn't be adequately managed, and there was too much of the wrong kind of garbage. So she changed the problem, and she decided that she was going to come up with the answer to how to reuse food serving items in a large enough scale to reduce the amount of garbage significantly. The solution that Caroline came up with was Redish, a reusable manufacturing company of food items that also significantly reduces manufacturing waste and energy. When I spoke to Caroline earlier this year, Redish had the capacity to collect, wash, sanitize, pack, and redistribute 150,000 used food serving utensils every day to places where food is consumed on a large scale, like schools, hospitals, and arenas. Here's a larger scale example of how addressing the problem differently increases the odds of success. 50 million people worldwide live in slavery or slavery-like conditions. It's appalling, isn't it? In 2013, 3 funders in the anti-slavery space came together, and their goal was to significantly reduce the number of people living in slavery. Their consensus was that the anti-slavery sector was fragmented, that projects were too scattered and limited to achieve significant outcomes. Instead, they looked at the problem as a system, which led to creating a collaborative fund that they called the Freedom Fund. The Freedom Fund took a more active role in the strategy, research, and public policies connected with anti-slavery. As of 2023, the Freedom Fund had supported 200 frontline organizations working in the anti-slavery sector. They had helped to liberate 31,000 people, and they impacted the lives of more than 1.6 million people around the world through liberation, education, social services, and policy issues. If either one of these initiatives had continued to address the problems that they originally intended to address, they would not have achieved as much as they did by changing tack and addressing a different problem. Whether you're in an organization or just in your own mind, which can be as busy as an organization, I'd like to plant the seed of a paradigm shift in how we approach problem solving. I hope it's one where creatively identifying the problem is the natural first step when you're at a junction and you're looking for new solutions or a new way of doing things. Where creativity is the approach that you use to accurately identify problems in the same way that you naturally fall back on brainstorming solutions. Because when you prioritize identifying the issue or the opportunity, rather than diving straight into looking for solutions, the results are more likely to be more effective, more meaningful, and happen more quickly. I mentioned earlier that I was previously a professional organizer. In fact, I was a juvenile organizer. At age 9, I was sorting our pantry and checking sell-by dates. My mother, who could spot an opportunity a mile off, let me have at it. At one point, as an early adult though, I began to feel sad when I saw the problems going on in the world around me. My organizing abilities failed me in the face of the big challenges that I witnessed. I thought that if I moved into the nonprofit sector, I could make a difference. But I had a dilemma. I was in a good job. I was earning more than my husband. I had great benefits. I even had a company car. My husband, however, was afraid that this change in approach would put too much of a strain on our household budget and vacation fund. I had to decide which path to take. Keep the high-paying job that wasn't fulfilling, or take the lower-paying job that was fulfilling. That's when I officially became a problem solver. I decided to take the approach that felt true to me, and I moved into the nonprofit sector, the lower-paying job, and I stayed there for 15 years. My husband, we split up soon after that decision, so he was no longer my problem. Back to the challenges we face. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, well, hey, that's all well and good, Ellia, but how do I know if I'm solving the right problem? Here are 3 creative ways that you can check your assumptions. The first one is the word blitz. In the word blitz, you quickly write down words or short phrases that you associate with the problem. You can do this on Post-it notes, on a whiteboard, on a virtual whiteboard. You can do it on your own, with other people all at once. Once you've got the words out, group them together. Look for similarities and patterns. And then look for the one that highlights what you think is closest to the problem you're really trying to solve. The second way of checking your assumptions is through someone else's shoes. Pick somebody that you admire, somebody that you look up to. It could be someone living or not, real or fictitious. It could be Oprah Winfrey, Steve Jobs, Yoda. Put yourself in their shoes. Look at the problem through their eyes. What questions would they ask? The last way I want to share for creatively identifying the real problem is the 5 whys. The 5 whys is a technique that's widely used in business management disciplines like Lean and Six Sigma. First, state the problem as you currently see it, and then ask why or why is that a problem 5 times. Each time takes you a little bit deeper until you get to the heart of the issue or it reveals an incorrect assumption. With these tools, you're all capable of being magnificent problem solvers. I'd like to leave you with these thoughts. You have the ability to solve problems faster and more easily as long as you understand that the problem isn't always the problem. And by the way, you can actually come up with amazing solutions, more amazing than you ever thought. Leaders need to establish a culture and a mindset of creative problem identification. If you're a leader, before you go into a brainstorming session, ask your team, are we addressing the right problem? And we can all contribute our unique experience and perspective to the problems and opportunities that arise in our daily lives, with our families, and in our communities. If you're a parent, for example, ask your kids, are you sure you're solving the right problem? Are you addressing the right problem when they come to you asking for help? Our future leaders desperately need our support as they develop their creative problem solving and critical thinking skills. And their answers may surprise you. What if you could contribute to solving one or more of the world's problems? I invite you to think like a cave woman. Pick an issue that you care about deeply and run it through the 5 whys. Now, if you think that you couldn't have an impact, this quote from Anon is just for you. If you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping in a room with a mosquito. That's a problem that needs solving. Thank you.